We all know the feeling, even though we try to fight it. The pit in our stomachs or the irrational irritation anytime we're around someone who's just that much better than we are. Envy. One of the 7 deadliest sins. Or is it? Can the discomfort we feel from comparing ourselves to others be an evolutionary breakpoint that helps ensure our survival as a species? Today, we're looking the monster square in its green eyes to explore what envy is, what makes us envious, and why it just might give us an evolutionary advantage. That's what you're in for today on Impolite Society.
Oh, I just detest rude, unladylike young ladies.
I hope you don't mind me being a tad rude.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Don't be rude.
That is some weird, wild stuff.
Shocking, isn't it?
It's a scandal!
But it's provocative.
Please stop making me blush.
Welcome to Impolite Society, the podcast that tackles the taboo topics you can't discuss in polite company. I am green-eyed Rachel.
And I am sinful coveter, Laura.
Today I have a real old school type topic for us to dive into, as we always are diving. We are
diving, exploring.
Diving, delving.
Ooh, that's a
Add
new
that
one.
to our repertoire of verbs that we use. But we have a kind of back to basics topic that we are going to delve into, and that is a good old fashioned taboo, like a good gold standard taboo. But don't get excited, because what we're talking about today has been described as the least fun of the 7 deadly sins.
I don't know. I think sloth might be up there, but okay.
Oh, I love a good sloth day.
Yeah, but is it like sexy? Is it exciting? No.
More than this.
I don't know.
But you'll find out.
I don't know. I think this one's a little sexy.
When it's involving your neighbor's wife.
Mm-hmm.
But to get us started, I'm going to start with a rude question. Laura, have you ever been jealous of someone?
No, I am a perfect person. Of course I have. I mean, all you have to do is open up social media, right? I see some bee on the internet. She's got that perfect face, perfect butt, living that life somewhere in Europe as like a fucking travel model on the continent, drinking wine, diving into the ocean, you know, just generally living a fantasy life. And I'm fucking pissed about it. How dare they?
That's fair to be envious of that. I have a own personal story of envy that hits a little closer to home. And
what? That's not close to home?
Well, like literally it was close to my home because it was somebody who I was neighbors with.
Oh,
well,
fair.
A couple blocks over. And this transcended just like a little twinge of jealousy. Like I coveted her life, or at least the parts that I saw.
Yeah.
And it was like biblical level, Old Testament level of covets. And every time I walk by that place to this day, I'm like, oh man, that lucky lady lives here. So what did this lady have going for her? Well, obviously she's thin, right? That's the core of all envy, right? And she had this beautiful house on this beautiful boulevard and these 2 beautiful children. And the house not only was nice, it was on a corner lot, tree-lined boulevard. And every time I walked by, I just felt like they were having a blast. I would be out walking the dogs in the morning at the crack of dawn, and she's like doing her little Pilates workouts in their living room. I could see through the window.
Oh, Jesus fucking
and
Christ.
Every time I walked by, the kids are playing in their pool that they got put in the back.
They're laughing.
They have this glamorous fence they built all across their double lot. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, if I could be anyone, I would be you. It just looks so great.
Pilates body, yeah.
Yeah, just jumping around her living room at 5:30 in the morning. Well, I'm out in the cold walking my dumbass dog, shivering. Like, I want to be where the warmth is. But if you haven't guessed it by now, we are talking about envy. envy, the star of the 9th and the 10th commandment, the greed-eyed monster itself. And this topic came to me while I was on one of those walks that put me back past that woman's house. And I thought to myself, how can I air my dirty laundry in a public way that shows how small of a person I really am inside? No, we did that the same exact way. No. Oh, no. I just felt these strong feelings, right? Like I had that emotional reaction, and then I felt a lot of shame about it. And my brain goes, where there's shame, there's usually a taboo. And this here's a big one.
And that's our trade on Impolite Society. Shame and sin. That sounds like a whiskey.
Yeah, shame and sin whiskey. For your sin and to nurse your shame.
There's definitely something going on there. That's the thing about these episodes, right? They're inspired by something in your everyday that tweaked an interest in your brain. And that's where you get these topics. That's why we do the delving into these things. I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, it's our excuse and motivation to actually follow through on the research. And not just do like 5 seconds of, it's fine.
Yeah.
Before giving up, because we're like, oh my God, I actually have to write it all down and share it with somebody. Now I better know what I'm talking about. And the joke is we still don't. But the idea here is that there is a lot of shame around envy, and it's also a lot of sin. Because if you follow a Judeo-Christian religion and are struggling with the fact that you too are mortal and will die someday, well, you can thank envy for that fact. Because according to Scripture, which seems to come up a lot on the show for a podcast that talks about sin and shame, it is actually envy that drove Cain to kill his big bro Abel, thus bringing death to humanity. Long story short, we would all be immortal if this Abel dude didn't go around bragging about how close he and his imaginary friend were, like way closer than him and his brother. He's like, I'm your best friend, but you're not my best friend. Yikes.
I had to revisit the story of Cain and Abel after reading your notes, because apparently it is true that if you don't use it, you lose it, because I had completely forgotten from my K through 12 religious education that Cain was jealous of Abel because God favored Abel's sacrifices. Abel was a shepherd and gave God sheep, and Cain was a farmer who only had produce.
Boo! God's no vegan.
Yeah. So if God hadn't had a clear preference for Abel's sheep over Cain's produce, we'd all be immortal. And isn't that a little sus anyway? What is God doing with all them sheep? I don't. Is he a sheep eater? Is he a sheep fucker? Who knows?
That's the most sacrilegious thing I think we've ever said on the podcast.
Whatever. We've said a lot of shit.
And that's coming from a lady who just 2 episodes ago, when we were talking about werewolves, when I asked, who eats the most sheep? You said me.
Mutton.
You really, yeah. So that's, if you don't even know what you do with all that sheep, then nobody does. And I think, like most scripture, if we dig into here, we will find the real villain is that God fellow all along.
Especially the Old Testament.
He's goading those two. But he's not alone, because in fact, many of the world's religions warn us against envy. The Quran tells its followers that envy is forbidden. Hinduism says you only get what you deserve. So if you envy, you're not just directing it at others, you're also directing it at the supreme being itself.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah. It's God's plan, to quote Drake. In Buddhism, envy is one of the 5 poisons that leads to suffering of the self and others. And even the Church of Satan says, do not take which does not belong to you. Again, I will say that this is not a theological podcast, but citing major religions and a few neckbeards, who I do have such a soft fondness for, shows that the overall temperature towards the feeling of envy, and I don't need to check my thermometer to know that we're not so hot on it.
It's kind of one of those rare cultural universals, or at least kind of universal-ish. It pops up in all these different cultures. It means it's not really a cultural thing in my eyes. It's a human thing. And I really, as usual, I agree with the Buddhists. It's so human. We all feel it, but it is poison. And I think that's why there's so many morality tales about it, why it pops up in so much of our fiction as well. It's something that we all struggle with.
We struggle with it. We feel it. We explore it through these stories. But what is envy? Or, for an even sexier question, how do we define it?
Ooh, you get me hot under the collar talking about definitions, girl. It's what we do here.
Yeah, there's nothing hotter than a definition, especially when it's read on the dictionary.com by the AI voice.
If you just said, according to dictionary.com, like I would crack my ass up.
According to dictionary.com. It worked. No, but envy is, of course, an emotion. You don't need dictionary.com to tell you that. And it's all about other people and the advantages that we perceive they have. But before we get into what makes up envy, I want to say what envy is not. Envy is not jealousy. These are not synonyms, as I had thought before doing this research.
Well, that's actually news to me because I thought they were the same as well. I thought envy was a little bit
Like stronger.
yeah, but otherwise that they were pretty much the same thing.
Well, apparently they're different, which nobody told me when I wrote the title of this episode, which I probably will be changing because of this information. Jealousy, it turns out, is all about possession. Like, I want to have what you have, or I don't want you to take what I have. I can be jealous of your car or your stellar thrift store find. I can be jealous of losing my status with somebody I value a lot, right? That's where it comes to jealousy in relationships. But my most simple analogy is through the use of my toddler son. Or I guess even dogs apply here because they're not that different.
No.
So when my son, who's 2, sees my daughter with one of his toy cars, he's jealous, right? When my dog sees my other dog getting pets, they're jealous. They want what the other has, or they want the affection of the person that gives them life-sustaining kibbles. What my toddler and my canine roommates, or whatever they are to me, lack is higher level emotions and social awareness that it takes to feel envy. So, to best summarize jealousy, I will use the famous words from our modern day Socrates, Ariana Grande. I see it, I want it.
It's a pretty basic emotion.
So with envy, it's a little bit more advanced than that. It takes a little bit more of understanding where you are, what you have in comparison to others, and how they're able to go about getting the things that you want. And that sounds a little abstract. So luckily, I was able to find a nice online recipe, after scrolling through like 10 pages worth of content about how they enjoy a little cup of envy on a crisp autumn morning. And it had all these little pictures and tips.
And then you hit the jump to recipe button and then it never works. And then it you pull up a bunch of videos and a bunch of shit. And you're like, just go to the
ads are
fucking
popping. Yes. After all that nonsense, I got to the real recipe. So if you're interested in making some envy, here's how.
I think it's sugar, spice, and everything bitter.
Yeah, bitter. It's
That's
either
what I
a
think.
component or outcome.
Yep.
So to make envy, first up, you want one part comparison. You need to not just want to possess a specific item or place in a person's affections. It's all about looking at another person and seeing how we measure up.
Got it. So I'm not as hot. I'm not as rich as these Instagram models. They're certainly the place that I want to be. So, all right. 1 cup comparison. Got it.
So up next, and which comes as no surprise, is a scoop of someone having something you don't, right? Because if you're just comparing yourself to losers, that's not making envy. That's just looking up your old high school classmates online. If you need some ideas for what to use in this step, look for people who have access to resources or privileges that you lack. Or you can really add anything that exceeds the accomplishments that you have within your own career, family life, relationships, appearance, or of course, money.
So hot bodies, beautiful faces, access to these places. Got it. This is easy.
Right. So we're looking at another person, a person who has the things that we want. And this is where you actually have to be careful, because when you're picking the person for your social comparison, you need to keep it a direct comparison to you. This means you can't go around being Delulu and shoot for the stars when making your envy soup and pick like Jeff Bezos for that comparison component, because that'll end up making some pretty weak envy.
Got it. It's got to feel attainable, something that's within your sphere. Nobody's going to turn into Jeff Bezos overnight. So maybe that hot girl on Instagram actually isn't the best ingredient for my envy soup, because I don't know that being that hot and thin was really ever in the cards for me. I think I gotta
feel that.
I think I gotta think a little bit smaller. So, think local, act global. I'm gonna think locally. I think I do have someone in mind. Someone I rationally/irrationally hate.
And I think I know who that person is. And I think I thought of them a lot while writing this stuff. And I had to take out some of those analogies. They're maybe a little too
revealing.
Close. Yes. Because in the words of famous philosopher Bertrand Russell, who's actually a famous philosopher, not a pop star, beggars do not envy millionaires, though of course they will envy other beggars who are more successful. So if you really want to make some strong envy, the more like the person you're comparing yourself to, the better. Because the more differences that exist, the easier it is to write those off as unfair advantages. So to me, seeing another woman my age get promoted at work, that used to bother me and get under my skin. Because if it was if somebody who's older, had more experience, or if they were just a dude, it explained it, right? But if it was somebody who was on paper just like me, it meant that they had something that I didn't. And that's where the envy comes in.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of when it comes to my envy recipe here. It's like, what's so great about her? Why her? Because on paper, we seem to be so alike and so uniform, and yet
the outcomes are so different.
Yes.
And that is what's going on in the heart of envy. And then to really add that little spicy thing to give it that extra kick, you have to have a little bit of inferiority. So envy is all about others getting perceived advantages, which means they have something you don't. Like you said, you think that, oh, that could have been me, or what's wrong with me? Maybe if I was just a little bit luckier or better looking or willing to flirt with my boss, whatever it is, there's just that kind of little thing that separates you from the person that is having the access to the resources or the access to the privileges that you want.
And I think the mystery aspect can add like another layer to this. Like, you can't necessarily point at it and say, I definitely know why this person has what I don't. There's this kind of like big question mark that really drives people crazy.
Yeah, it's what makes it so sticky. So, right, you can look at the Instagram model and think, well, she was born beautiful. Like, I can't fight genetics.
Yep.
But if somebody who on paper has the same education, same experience, maybe a few lower IQ points, IQ with an I.
A lowercase I.
I just always imagined it with a heart, too. I don't know why. So when you add this comparison with a person who's like you, mix it with those feelings of inferiority, you get envy and a heaping helping of the shame that comes with it. So when we mix up a good serving of envy, we get some pretty interesting outcomes, because let's face it, it's not cute to be envious. Our brains don't want to be like, yeah, I'm super envious of that person. No. We're trying to protect ourselves from ourselves. That's what our brains do all day, every day. Mm-hmm. So when we feel envious, it often bubbles up in ways that don't just say, hey, I'm envious of you. It comes out as apathy or irony, scorn, snobbery, and even narcissism, which are all different takes of the same defense mechanism, which is using contempt to minimize the advantages that we perceive the other to have, and in turn, that we don't.
I think if you're an emotionally intelligent person, you'll probably like understand.
Get there in the end.
Yeah, you'll get there, and recognize it. But even if you are an emotionally intelligent person, you still have those defense mechanisms that are in place. But my genuine question is, but what if that person really does suck? Like, no, okay, fine. No, I get it. I'm protecting myself here. I am going to accept the fact of my envy. I'm going to face it bold-faced. But she really does fucking suck.
That's
Sticky, right?
Yes, it is, because
It's hard to pull it apart.
precisely. If you are having trouble pulling this apart to understand how it might manifest, we're going to do a little theater for you. So, Laura, you are going to be good news gal, and I'm going to be bitter Betty to show how envy might materialize in your day-to-day life.
Hey, I just got a cool new job.
A job's still a job.
Yeah, but I just met this awesome new person who's super into me.
Again? Like, didn't you just break up with someone?
Oh, look. Did you see her new outfit? Oh my gosh, it looks so great.
I think I saw it on Amazon. I'm pretty sure it's a dupe.
I just got into this awesome graduate program.
Oh my gosh. I always wanted to go back to school, but it's just like really a hard time for me because of X, Y, and Z. And wait a minute, have I not told you about what's happening with X lately?
So much drama.
I know, right? So we've all heard those kind of things.
And we've all said them, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We've all felt envy and we've all had envy directed at us. But why do we feel it? We're talking about it and how uncomfortable it is and how hard it is to unpack. Why are we plagued with it? As these cooperative social animals, you think that being envious is actually a little bit antisocial and maladaptive for succeeding as a species.
Or is it?
Is it? Bum, bum, bum. It's also easy to think that this like thick envy that we feel is more of a modern phenomenon. But as we talked about with the religion, it's old. It's really old. And here's an interesting tidbit that I learned, that early humans giving sacrifices like Cain and or Abel, that was to placate the gods they were sacrificing to, or keep the gods from being envious of us humans and thus punishing us. So I just thought this is like the most human thing ever, because it's like that classic feeling that, things are going so good right now. But are they too good? I better kill off some of my livestock to make sure.
Do a little rain dance or whatever, like whatever weird rituals that modern people do. I mean, it is. It's a tale as old as time, and it's heartbreakingly relatable. Ancient humans, even always looking around the corner, just afraid of what's going to come next. How can I keep riding on this high horse? People just really never change.
Waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yep.
Trying to keep it from dropping on my head. So since envy has been around since the dawn of humanity, it might be safe to say that there is an evolutionary advantage to it. Some way, somehow, our envious ancestors had a leg up on the competition. But how? In my research, I saw two plausible theories. The first is that envy motivates us into action by either encouraging us to work harder to get independently what our neighbor has, or just by straight up snatching it.
This is always what I think of when I think of this emotion and what benefit that it might have. I 100% think that this is it. This makes us strive and thus succeed, which is success defined very differently back then.
Yes.
Succeed means living. So we are this social cooperative animal, but we are also animals who need to survive. And that generation of deep feeling about it is going to push us forward to do more.
Yeah, right. So like Ugbert has killed a big deer. I'm going to go out and kill a bigger deer so that I have the esteem of the tribe.
And thus you get more deer.
Yes. So when you put it that way, it does seem like it could be an advantage. And that advantage really ties into the part of the recipe that focused on direct comparison. Because let's be honest, Laura, those private jets, unlimited vacation, flawless skin and hair, and staff that do our mundane daily task for us, that's all sounds great. But it does not get under my skin as much as that mom and that beautiful house with her skinny little body and beautiful family.
I mean, it's also some of those things that you can't just snatch it or get it. It's too out of the zone. You can't see, like, you know, the behemoth German who took down an elk. You know what I mean? Like, that's like 10,000 times bigger. Everything was smaller.
Yes, yeah. The Bushman in Africa does not see the Inuit in like their water house, their frozen water house when they're thirsty and
exactly.
being like, dang, I had that.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that, evolutionary psychologists would say, is that envy is focused on the like because it motivates you to access the resources that are more in demand in your circle. So we're not shooting for the stars. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to be Bill Gates because that wouldn't help us in that situation.
Yeah.
What we want is to get the most berries as opposed to the biggest elk if they're not around.
Yeah.
When I think of my own envy, my own covetous situation, in theory, I could get up early to work out. In theory, I want to make sure I hammer that point home. I could also work harder to make money to afford a bigger, better house. I could pay someone to make my backyard awesome. In theory, it's important to emphasize that. I could take the steps to bridge the gap between me and the parts of her life that I covet. And it's a whole lot more realistic than trying to become a mega rich.
Yeah, but all that sounds like a bunch of really hard work, and ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, that's why we would not be up on that high up on the evolutionary chain.
No berries.
Yeah,
no berries
like,
for
who's
you.
got time for that? I'd rather sit here in my cave on my butt.
Eating bark.
Yeah, why do I have to go out and get all the berries? Like Skinny Miss Energy's doing it all for me. Duh. And this also rings true in how envy works. It's all about resources or advantages that lead to more resources from like an evolutionary physical need standpoint. No one is super envious of the monk who's taking vows of poverty and only drinks bone broth, even if he's the happiest, most content man in the world.
I mean, I'm a little bit envious of it. I'm envious that he could be happy in such a situation, but I know I couldn't. But I'm definitely more envious of that globe-trotting model, that's for sure.
Right, because show me an asshole who has access to money, power, and sex, and that guy is going to be someone we're all envious of. So our monkey brains prioritize that food, safety through social esteem, and sex over happiness. And to me, that's a pretty clear sign that this was designed by evolution because it's seeking out those things that are going to pass on your genes.
Yeah. Evolution doesn't give a shit about happy. That's why it's the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That's the very tippy top because evolution doesn't give a shit. As long as you're eating, sleeping, and procreating, that's all that matters. That's your lizard brain.
This theory seems to hold water, and then this is where it falls apart in my book. So let's do a little thought experiment. Imagine you have a coworker. And they're just like you, same age, race, gender, and suddenly they have a fat promotion. We're talking new office, new higher title, direct reports, fat bonus. What would bother you more to find out after the fact? That they were your equal in every single way and your boss flipped a coin to determine who was going to get the promotion, or they were remarkably better than you?
This is tough. On one hand, I think that if they were actually better than you, that's actually good news for you because you could improve. You could work harder on X, Y, Z, but the coin toss, if it were that, I would be so much angrier and so much more bitter and more justified in my bitterness as well.
Yeah, like think about it. Which one would be more of a gut punch when you heard it?
The coin. The coin.
Right. And research shows that when presented this thought experiment, most people will say that as well. We have stronger envy when a peer is undeservedly rewarded over us. And I had a case of this today when I was scrolling on Reddit. and some asshole was on there talking about how he inherited $10 million. And I was like, this is triggering my envy, because it wasn't that he invested his money or, built a startup and then sold it. It was that he just inherited it. And because I perceived that as unjust, it made me a lot more uncomfortable and envious than if somebody had said, oh, I worked for this $10 million. I'd have been like, okay, well, there's...
I saved, I labored, I invested, I spent hours in front of my computer and my day trading or what the fuck ever.
Yeah, which you can't day trade your way that rich. I mean, very few people. That's like the same success as a podcaster, It was really interesting that happened, because that was this theory in action, which is then kind of pokes a hole in the evolution theory, because why would something that we have no control over inspire the emotion more, right? Because you can't outwork luck. There is no advantage to be had by stewing over luck, right?
Bitterness is never an evolutionary advantage.
Yeah, right? It's just like nothing I could do in my day-to-day life would get me a $10 million inheritance. Mm-hmm. So what's the evolutionary advantage to feeling it? And that's the same thing with my crazy obsession with this lady in the nice house, right? Is that, am I jealous of all those things that she has, or am I jealous that she was able to get them because she and her husband are a little bit more advanced in life, a little bit older. So they were able to get all of this when it was affordable. Because nowadays, to get the same house, to get the same improvements, all of those things would be way harder because of the housing market and because our neighborhood has changed, right? So I literally can't do anything no amount of envy is going to make me older, right?
Yeah.
Or make me born at a different time. So this is where I think that kind of envy as a motivator for individual change loses its traction.
Yeah, I definitely am following you there. And it seems that it might be less about getting those resources outright and more about fairness, maybe.
I like that, because when you boil it down to a lot of this, like especially the coin toss or the coworker that gets stuff that you don't, or this lady being in the right place at the right time, think back to those toddlers. What are they saying that summarizes all of this?
Not fair.
It's not fair. And that is what brings me to the second theory, which I fully get behind. And that is that envy is actually a good thing, but not in how it affects the individual, but how it affects the individual's relationship with the group. And this theory was shaped by anthropologists who lived with the Uhasi people, which is a hunter-gatherer group in southern Africa. They reported seeing envy used as a way to keep the group harmonious. For example, if someone took too much, the envy button was triggered among the group and they would push back. The tribe's members would openly mock those who took more than their fair share of a kill, saying things like, "Oh, look at Big Back McGee over here. He needs the entire right flank of the island." And beyond that, they also expressed envy in order to keep each other humble. So when someone brought down dinner, it was common to hear their friends and family say things like, "Wow, you killed that yourself? Must have been pretty sick and tired." Or, "Looks like the Zebra nursing home is missing one of its residents with how tough this meat is." So in this sense, envy was a breakpoint on greed and ego. It's part of that great balancing act that is social cooperation. If we get too much tug in one direction, you get a nice little insult to pull you back on track.
Bring you back down to earth. And I think of it as the tall poppy syndrome. Have you? It's
nope, never heard of that.
It's a common phrase in the UK. Basically, in a field of poppies, if one poppy grows too tall, higher than the rest of the group, somebody is got to lop that pretty flower head off. Keep them even with the group. And I think this has some similarities with the other theory, though. It has to do with resources at some level, like someone took too much. Well, what if they get too big for their britches and then lord over all of us? They deserve versus what we deserve. So it's like, in my eyes, it looks more like the social cooperation version of wanting resources. It still has something to do with resources, but it's not necessarily about you needing to strive to get more, but more keeping us all level.
On the same playing field.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking too. Like that first one is almost like the Americanized individualist component where it's
totally.
like, I need to do better. Or as opposed to that person needs to do better with sharing, right? But also in our modern world, how can you share a promotion? How can you share a job? You know, those are things that can't be shared.
Fair.
So maybe that theory is just applying this greater universal human emotion to our modern saying.
Yeah.
But I wanted to point out that it does seem a little fishy that organized religion has been the one telling us not to envy, considering that little train of thought that we just rode on down the tracks. You know, organized religion, the group that collects and hoards resources while telling us what to do with our lives. Like, do you ever think that they might have something to gain by that balancing act being out of whack? Like, oh, we got all this gold, we got all these riches.
Don't envy us.
Envy is bad. You should not want what we have.
Well, the Christians are also the ones that like said that suicide was like the greatest sin you can commit against God in a time where they relied on your labor in order to survive.
Well, that's a whole deal. We're trying to grow the nation. That's why you can't spill your seed on the ground.
Yep. Uh-huh. It
Testicles.
always serves a purpose.
So it serves the purpose of the organization. But that is something I don't think you can ever really fight. But that's to say, maybe question. If somebody's telling you something, maybe question it.
Always
Maybe
question it.
But what I do know is that the Yuhasi people have maintained their way of life pretty much unchanged since the beginning of humanity itself. So they might be onto something.
Yeah, but do they have Instagram? No, just kidding. You know I fucking hate.
Yeah, the Bushmen must be protected at all costs. Do not give them social media.
Yeah, you
because
know I hate social media. I'm just fucking around. Fuck that.
maybe that's what's happening in the comments. That's why we're roasting each other. It's the new Serengeti, baby. Stay humble.
Yeah. Take it down, baby. Take it down a notch. You think you're so fucking cute. Felt cute. Might delete later. Me.
It's actually a good tie-in because we're not living on the bush anymore. And in the modern world, our ancient emotions can do a little bit more harm than good, or like way more harm than good. And lucky for us, we are living in a world of instant envy doling devices conveniently in our pockets.
It's the ancient hardware on modern software, very literally.
Yeah, we're trying to run Windows 1000 on that old
Cave
PC
brain.
you had in the 90s.
Yep.
So social media gives us a ton of exposure to other people and their resources, which is like way more than our Bushman brains can handle. Because here's an example that I learned recently that gives some perspective on how tiny our social circles used to be, even at the highest level. And this, of course, speaks to my soul because this summer I have embraced my inner Tudor history nerd. I learned recently that Henry VIII, famous womanizer and king of England and Ireland at the time, had access to roughly 30 women at a time. There were only 30 women he saw and interacted with regularly. We can see exponentially more women than that in 30 seconds on the internet.
In a lot of different positions.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying. It's this small pond, big fish, and now we live in this giant ocean where all these little teeny tiny fish, but we're all brushing up against each other, and God, do we fucking feel it. And all these little fish are posting Instagrams about how big and mighty fish they are.
There's always bigger fish, right?
Always a bigger fish.
So essentially, we're not just comparing ourselves to the fish in our school, right? We're not just looking at our clans people or our neighbors or coworkers or the 29 other ladies of court, which, I mean, given those odds, I think I could have been queen too.
Me too. Both
right?
of us.
Yeah.
Queens.
I think either of us could easily have charmed 50-year-old overweight man.
I think definitely you've got that Tudor like
I do
forehead
have a
going
Tudor
on.
forehead. I would have crushed it.
And my daughter too, both of you guys. High forehead.
yeah.
Very pretty, I think.
I guess you have to say that because she's your daughter. But in my relation to me, I'm like, that's very kind. Basically, now we have unlimited people to compare ourselves to. So while on paper, we know these carefully cultivated worlds that we see on the screens of our smartphones, we know they're not real. Both that of influencers and our friends and family. We know this is the slices of life that they want to share, that are made and designed to be shared. And we might know that deep down, but we still have a hard time accepting that on an emotional level.
I think it's a constant battle, and not just making yourselves acknowledge and accept that this is not reality, though that is a hard thing to do. It's trying to axe it out of your world is almost impossible. I have spent the last year or more curating my social media algorithm, being very intentional of seeing things and like being like snooze, or like, honestly, I'm even aware of like my eye line, because like they track your eye line and like what you look at and what you hover at. And I'm very intentional and I'm just like, nope, not looking at it, and scroll on. And I'm still getting shit that I don't want to see, like these hot bitches in Italy. Jesus fucking Christ, go away. I don't want to see it.
Joke's on my algorithm. I have a big old crack on my screen, so I can't look at that spot. So they don't know what I'm looking at. They just keep giving me random shit. No, it's not good, because then it just gives me random stuff. It's never ladies in Italy. That wouldn't be the worst thing to see. So it's no surprise that studies have found scrolling had a negative and immediate effect on our outlook, with those who had just finished scrolling having lower moods and more feelings of envy. And I will say that this has influenced how I approach social media, not just from a consumer, but also a creator. But unfortunately, there's no clear-cut answers. But we do have some ideas. One way to avoid some of that scrolling blues is to use social media for its intended purpose and to actually connect with your friends and family. Research found passive usage of social media to have more negative effects on moods than actually engaging and interacting with others. So a good thing to do is maybe connect with Impolite Society on all of our social media channels that we have. So we'll see you there. Come engage with us, and we will definitely make you
feel special.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you walking away feeling good about yourself.
Yeah, but good luck on that. I mean, you can connect with only your direct circle and all, but you are going to see that shit anyway. Sponsored content, it's everywhere. You cannot avoid it. It's how they sell you things. That envy, that feeling is what they are tapping into in order to get you to hit buy.
Right. So being aware of that's probably step one.
Yes.
And helping you compartmentalize all of this. But that's when envy is used against you. Envy might not be all bad either. Feeling envious probably won't stop Hungry Herbert from taking more than his fair supper anymore. But it can still motivate us and drive creativity. Maybe envy is only as bad as the power we let it have over us. Discomfort can be a motivator for change. If you feel hungry, you don't just sit in your hunger all day. You get up and grab something to eat. So I think back to that loneliness episode we did, where you, instead of it being an emotion that defines your state of being, it's just an indicator, a warning light going off that says, if I'm feeling envy, maybe all I need to do is get up and do something different, even if that's as simple as putting your phone down for a while.
That is always a message I can get behind.
Yeah.
Put down the fucking phone. Unless you're listening to Impolite Society podcast available now.
Well, then you
on
don't
your
need
platform.
to, because you can hear it. You can move around.
Yeah.
And we'll never make you feel bad about yourself
No.
unless you're an adult wearing diapers, apparently. See, this beef has now become one-sided because I will never let it go.
Yeah, Impolite Society will always make you feel better about yourself because we really got nothing to brag about.
That's our tagline. We have
We got
nothing
to
brag about. And on that note, that's all I got for you today, folks. Let me tell you someone I'm not envious of, the sucker who has to edit this episode. Oh, wait, that's me. I'm going to be back. I got to go get editing.
But what we really covet is a 5-star rating and review. Please leave one for us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, if you've enjoyed this episode. And as always, share Impolite Society with your fellow bitter friends on social media. We're telling you to take down your phone, but then really pick it up and hit the share button, because that's your immediate circle. That's healthy. That's a good connection.
Send him a note. Put it in the snail mail.
Yeah. Do it in some stationery.
Postcard.
And that is the best way for our Impolite Society to grow, is through word of mouth, letting other people know about us. And thank you for joining us. May you be the hot wife that your neighbors covet. And stay curious, our socialites, and keep marching to the beat of your own drum.
Make a life for yourself that others envy. Just kidding. Derive value from your own satisfaction.
I don't know that song.
I just made it up. That's why you don't know it.
I love it.